If you were trapped in a small town, taken over by bloodthirsty kids who wanted to sacrifice you to an enormous monster, what would you do? These greedy farmers sold out their town's future for a chance to make a quick buck, and now it's time for a hostile takeover by the younger generation. I'm here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat Eden and her monster in Children of the Corn. This unsuspecting small town is about to be under new management. Late one afternoon in Rylestone, Nebraska, young orphan girl Eden Edwards sits outside the children's home playing pretend when she notices someone approaching her from the nearby cornfield. An older kid named Boyd walks out looking like he's on a mission, and Eden asks him if he was out in the corn all night, but he doesn't answer. Boyd walks over to a nearby bench looking over several sinister tools before picking out a knife and walking towards the building as the stalks rustle in the wind. One of the employees comes out and asks him where he's been, but he stabs him in the stomach and continues inside, taking the adults who work there hostage. The police eventually arrive on the scene, but before they can get there, the local sheriff and his friends fill the building with an animal sleeping gas called halothane, accidentally killing everyone inside. Sitting at his desk a few days later, Sheriff Gebler scrolls through news reports about the botched rescue attempt on his phone while talking to Pastor Penny. He laughs that he won't get reelected and tells the pastor that the only good thing to come out of the situation was his officers fighting Eden wandering around in the corn after about 4 days. The sheriff sends the pastor in to speak with her, asking him to find out if Boyd told her anything that would explain why he killed all those people. Eden waits in a nearby office working on a puzzle, and the pastor sits down to talk with her. He asks her if she's going to need a new place to live, and tells her that if she's a good girl, she can come stay with him. He asks her if Boyd said anything to her before he went crazy, and Eden tells him that all he said was that he was sorry for not being able to kill every adult in town. Later that day, teenage brother and sister Cecil and Bo Williams go for a walk in the cornfield. Bo notices that the corn isn't doing well and blames it on chemicals that the farmers have been adding to the soil. Cecil blows some dust in her face, and Bo gets upset, saying that a toxic fungus grows on rotting crops that can make you sick. Cecil doesn't take her seriously, but Bo tells him to pay attention and hands him a letter saying that she's been accepted to go to college. He gets upset and says that now he'll be stuck here alone in this creepy dying town. Bo tries to reassure him that he'll leave one day too, but Cecil isn't convinced. Just then, Eden rides up on horseback wearing a bright red wig. They hear a gunshot in the distance, and Eden trots off towards the noise with Bo and Cecil following behind her. The three of them arrive at a corn silo where all of the town's young kids are gathered around destroying crops and causing mischief. One kid, Wally, stands with his hands tied together on a plank jutting from the top of the silo over a big pile of corn. Eden pulls a rolled up piece of paper from her pocket and reads it out to Wally that he's been sentenced to die for letting the dog get into the rat poison. All of the kids chant for Wally to walk the plank, while another kid pokes him towards the edge with a farming tool. Local teenager Calder shows up and yells at the kids for destroying his grandma's car. He asks Eden what they're doing out there, and she tells him that they're executing Wally. Eden orders one of the other kids to light the corn on fire when Wally falls in it, but Bo stops him, saying that the dust in the air and gas leaking from the car will cause an explosion and kill them all. Eden realizes that she's right and says they'll just have to pretend to burn him instead. Cecil joins in, and the kids run in a circle beneath the silo while Eden dances on the roof of the car, smiling at the trouble she's causing. Bo gets nervous and follows Calder away to the field. Bo says that she thinks the little kids have been breathing in too much fungus. She notices a bruise on Calder's chin, and he tells her that it happened while he was protecting his little brother from their dad. They talk about how all of the kids their age will be at the river this weekend for one last party before school, but they'll both be hanging back, and it'll be just them, the adults and the young kids that left the town. Bo and Calder go their separate ways, and as she walks alone down the empty country road, she hears a strange whispering noise coming from the corn. She listens and looks in, but sees nothing and walks away creeped out. Okay, they say that children are the future, but if that's the case, then this town is in big trouble. When we first see Boyd, it's pretty obvious that he's up to no good. He looks like he's been wandering around in the corn for days. He goes straight for the bench of improvised weapons, which would have been the moment where I went from suspicious of his intentions to getting out of there as fast as possible. Eden's either not scared or has no survival instincts since she just sits there talking to him. But luckily for her, Boyd has other targets in mind. Before the police can arrive, the incompetent sheriff pumps the building full of halothane gas. in an attempt to knock Boyd out, accidentally killing everyone inside. Halothane is a general anesthetic, which means that it's most commonly used in gas form to put people and animals to sleep during medical procedures. Side effects include an irregular heartbeat, respiratory depression, and liver failure, which can be fatal if the dose is high enough. Given their experience using the gas on farm animals, the sheriff and his posse should have known how dangerous it could be for the children inside if they inhaled too much. The police seem to let this go as a well-intentioned mistake, but the sheriff's negligence results in the deaths of over a dozen kids, and they really should have put him under arrest on manslaughter charges at least. The sheriff says that they found Eden after 4 days wandering in the cornfields, and it doesn't even look like they got the poor kid a shower or change of clothes before they dumped her in a room to occupy herself with some puzzles. He's too busy worrying about how the news story is going to hurt his chances at re-election, and he's sending the creepy pastor in to interview her. Speaking of the pastor, everything about this guy screams stranger danger, and any sheriff worth his badge shouldn't be allowing him within 1,000 feet of a child. Forget about letting him take custody of a traumatized orphan. All throughout the town, the adults fight and bicker with each other while the kids seem to be the only ones getting anything productive done. They should be out playing and enjoying their lives, but instead they've had to grow up quickly and learn to fend for themselves since they can't rely on their parents. The adults in this town are looking less and less trustworthy by the second, and maybe Boyd was right about wanting to get rid of them all. Out in the field, Bo says that the plants are dying from chemicals being used in the soil, and that the toxic fungus that grows on the rotting leaves can have dangerous side effects for the town. Specifically, Bo is referring to aflatoxins. Aflatoxins are the most poisonous variety of mycotoxins, which are toxic compounds that are produced by certain types of molds that grow in decaying crops. Children are the most heavily affected by exposure to aflatoxins. One particular species of mycotoxin, producing fungi known as ergo, can cause poisoning that results in painful seizures, vomiting, and even psychosis in those affected. Given all this information, it's safe to say that Bo was right to be worried about how much of the dust the local kids are breathing in. The kids are gathered around the silo, taking out their anger on various fruits and vegetables. But I thought this movie was about corn, not smashing pumpkins. Wally's trial seems a bit too real, and it looks like it's an instant away from crossing the line from harmless game to somebody ending up in the hospital. Younger kids often have trouble distinguishing between games and reality, and I'd hate to ruin their fun, but if I were Bo, I'd want to get out of there and call the cops and stop them before they took things too far. These kids desperately need to be put in timeout, and I think I could take at least a dozen of those little delinquents in a fair fight, but since they're all armed with improvised weapons, that would make the situation a lot more dangerous. Things are on the brink of getting out of hand, and Bo made the right call in leaving when she had the chance before the kids turned on her. As they're walking away, Bo tells Calder that she thinks the kids have been breathing in too much of the fungus, which could explain their oddly violent behavior. She notices Calder's bruised face that he got while protecting his brother from his dad, which is even further evidence that all of the adults in this town are pure evil. On top of all this, there seems to be some sort of evil entity lurking in the cornfield. It watches Bo and almost gets her while she's walking home alone, but I guess that it isn't ready to strike yet, and we'll all have to wait and see what happens next. Bo makes it to town and Cecil jumps up behind her. They walk down the street together until they see their mom getting in the truck with another man. Bo wants to leave and tells Cecil that they shouldn't get involved, but he tells her that the problem is bigger than just their parents' relationship troubles. Cecil says that the whole town is so broken that nobody cares enough to fix it, but it's not her problem now that she's moving to Boston, and storms off, leaving Bo alone. Bo walks across the street to the community hall where her father, Robert, is holding a meeting to discuss the town's future. He says that their corn crop is dying because of the herbicides and GMOs being pumped in by the corrupt company that they sold their land to. Just then, the local kids walk in led by Eden and sit down in the back. Robert continues that it's no use pointing fingers if they want to move forward, but the pastor chimes in that he thinks what's ruining the town isn't some outside force, but their own moral corruption. Robert says that their only way out is to give up on farming and stop any corn this year in exchange for government subsidies. Bo steps in and says that the adults should be ashamed for selling out the town and ruining its future. She insists that they try to fix the soil instead of giving up on it altogether, but Robert says that doing so would take years, and if they try to fix things, they'll just end up making things worse. He puts the matter up to a vote, and the adults almost unanimously agree to bulldoze their corn crop in exchange for the government payout. Eden chimes in and says that the children should get a vote, but the crowd laughs in her face, and she storms out of the building followed by her gang of kids. Robert says that the vote is final, and in 2 days, corn farming will be done in Ralstone forever. Eden walks through the cornfield alone and crying, and a massive hand made of corn reaches out to comfort her. Later, one of the earth movers fires up and gets to work, with Eden watching from horseback nearby. She rides off and goes to visit every kid in town, getting them on board with her plan for revenge. That night, Cecil walks around the neighborhood listening to the sounds of adults fighting in every house. Suddenly, Eden appears from behind a tree and says that she can help with his pain. She leads Cecil to a circle in the corn where several young girls sit picking kernels off of cobs and creepily chanting, he loves me not." Eden motions for Cecil to follow her deeper into the corn, and he hears a strange whispering as he walks into the darkness. The next morning, Bo, Calder, and their friends Carly and Tanika talk about what they can do to get the town back on track. Bo says that she reached out to a reporter who agreed to come out and cover the story so they can show the whole world how the adults have let the town fall apart. Later that day, Bo goes looking for Eden and finds her and the gang of kids at the bottom of an excavated pit, painting the corn's roots with pig's blood. She asks what they're doing, and Eden tells her that they gotta feed the corn somehow. Bo stands there in shock while all the kids stare at her, but then tells Eden that if she really wants to save the corn, they need to tell all of the adults in town that there's going to be an emergency meeting at the community hall at 10 p.m. that night. Eden asks her why, and Bo tells her that they're going to put the adults on trial with a big city news reporter coming in to cover the story. The kids agree, and Bo leaves as they go back to feeding the corn. That night, Bo, Cecil, and their father sit watching TV in the living room. Bo hears a scream and looks out the window, where she sees a group of younger kids running by. One of them stops and stares at her, and Bo sees that she's covered in blood. Suddenly, the girl shines her flashlight on her face and for an instant turns into some kind of corn demon. Bo nearly has a heart attack and falls back in her seat, but when she looks again, the normal-looking girl runs off down the street. Bo and Cecil say that they're going to bed, and she tries to get her dad to do the same, but he doesn't respond. Upstairs in her room, Bo asks Cecil if they're making a childish mistake, but he says that it's never a mistake to try and change the world. It's almost 10:30, and Robert rolls over in bed, realizing that his hands have been cuffed. He looks in front of him and sees Bo and Cecil standing at the foot of the bed. He asks them what's going on, and Bo tells him that they're holding a mock trial, and he's the guest of honor. She tells him to come quietly without waking their mom, and it'll all be over soon, and he reluctantly agrees to go. The four of them get in the car and head off to the community hall, stopping to pick up Calder on their way. When they get there, they see signs of chaos outside, and can tell right away that something has gone horribly wrong. Bo and Calder get out of the car and find Eden at the front door with her horse pulling a rope tied to something inside the building. Bo asks her what's going on, and Eden pretends like she doesn't know. Bo checks her phone to try and contact the reporter, but sees that she has no service. And Eden tells her that it doesn't matter anymore anyway. She tells them that they were late and the younger kids did the trial without them. Eden asks Bo if she wants to see something and opens the doors, revealing Calder's dad dangling from the rope tied to the horse on the other side. Bo and Calder rush to help him, but Bo takes the horse and walks away, pulling him up out of reach and breaking his neck. Okay, Eden just appointed herself judge, jury, and executioner. And unfortunately for the adults in town, her brand of justice comes with a heavy dose of revenge. At the meeting, the adults vote to bulldoze the crops and laugh in Eden's face when she speaks up for the children, which is a decision that they'll soon come to regret. Eden goes out to the cornfield and a massive monster reaches out to comfort her. Proof that not only is there a real creature out there, but that Eden has a special bond with it. This is not looking good for the adults who just voted to kill her plant-based friend and laughed her out of town. Bo decides to call in a reporter to expose the town on national television, which is a decent idea, but I would have done things a bit differently. She and her friends all have camera phones with access to the internet, so why not just tell the story themselves? Public interest stories like this that focus on the environment go viral all the time, and they probably could have spread the word easily without the need to rely on help from one specific reporter. The reporter might say that she wants to help, but there's a good chance that she's just in it for herself, like all of the other adults in this town. And so I would have decided to just handle things on our own. Bo goes looking for Eden and finds that a gang of kids under her leadership have slaughtered a pig and are painting its blood on the roots to, in her words, feed the corn. Bo is freaked out by the scene, but not nearly freaked out enough in my opinion, and she needed to run to the sheriff's office and warn them that something really bad was going on before it was too late. Instead, she continues with her plan and recruits the psychotic kids to wait until nightfall and round up all the adults in town. And you don't need a crystal ball to predict how that is bound to go. Hearing screams from outside and seeing kids run by covered in blood should have been Bo's first sign that there was an unapproved change of plans. Her vision of the young girl turning into a corn monster could have just been a hallucination brought on by stress and exposure to the fungi on the decaying crops. But it could also be a sign that something much more sinister is going on behind the scenes. Night comes in and it's time for Bo to execute her master plan, which falls apart about as quickly as you would expect. Let's put ourselves in her dad's position for a second. He's just woken up with his hands cuffed and his teenage kids telling him that they're going to take him to town hall and put him on trial. What sane parent on the face of this earth would actually agree to do this? If I tried this on my parents, they would have Harry Houdini'd out of those cuffs and grounded me into the deepest depths of oblivion. Also, how did they not wake up their mom when she was literally sleeping right there? They even managed to move her into the trunk of the car, leading me to believe that she drank herself into this state. And that's not a good way to be when you're responsible for the welfare of 2 teenage children. It's no wonder that Bo and Cecil are so upset with them. The final and biggest flaw in Bo's plan is that she had no way of knowing exactly when her dad would fall asleep. She should have picked a later time for the trial to begin, but they end up arriving half an hour behind schedule and find that Eden has already taken it upon herself to get things in motion. When they find Calvin hanging from the ceiling, Bo and Calder rush to help him by lifting his legs and taking some of the pressure off of his neck. This isn't a terrible strategy, but if they were paying attention, then they should have noticed that the rope was tied to Eden's horse. If they had just gotten the horse to back up a few steps, Calvin would have lowered right down onto the ground and been fine. Instead, they panic and let Eden walk right up to the horse and slowly lead it away, raising Calvin to the ceiling and breaking his neck. If they really wanted to save him, they should have body slammed that kid before she got anywhere near the horse. But he wasn't exactly a model parent anyway, so I can't say I feel bad about his demise. He kind of had it coming, and Eden's rampage is only just getting started. Eden and her gang take Bo, Calder, and her parents hostage and walk them to the police station. Bodies of adults lay in the streets, and their cars are in flames as all-out chaos is taking over. They get to the police station, and another group of kids are already tearing the place up. Bo looks and sees that all of the adults in town are locked in the cell. The sheriff and pastor demand that Eden let them out, but she zaps them with a taser and tells them to shut up. Bo sits down with her friends, and her dad tells her that they need to do something to help them. Calder agrees and lunges at Eden, but before he can make it 3 steps, one of the kids hits him in the back with a baseball bat, dropping him to his knees, and another comes along and knocks half of his face off, killing him instantly. Before Bo and her friends can even process what just happened, another kid comes in and throws a box of gas masks into the room. Eden puts one on and tells the adults that she's going to gas them with halothane to get revenge for her friends who were killed at the children's home. She releases the gas, asking them how it feels, and all of the adults pass out. As the gas shuts off, some of the adults wake up and realize that they're at the bottom of an excavated pit next to the corn. Eden stands over them in front of a bulldozer, and Bo sees that her mother is down in the hole. The sheriff threatens Eden, but she tells the other kids to fire up the machines. The kids pick up a huge load of dirt as the parents beg for their lives and try to climb out, but Eden just looks on smugly as they bury them alive. Bo holds her dead mother's hand and cries as her friends come to comfort her. She says that her dad was right when he said if she tried to fix things, she would only make things worse. Bo tells her friends to get out of town if they can, but she's going to stay and stop Eden from killing her dad too. Carly and Tanika say that they're going to go to the next town over and get help, leaving Bo alone to deal with the kids. Okay, I know Bo wanted to get some dirt on the adults of the town, but I don't think this is what she had in mind. When they arrive at the police station, Bo sees that Eden's gang have locked all of the town's adults in the big cell together. Calder tries to fight back, but his plan, or lack thereof, was obviously going to fail since he was surrounded by kids with weapons. Even though he could have easily taken several of them on in a fair fight, they're highly organized and heavily armed, and trying to bum rush them like that only gives them some extra practice practice for Little League and leaves Bo without her most useful ally in the battle. Now, my approach to this situation would depend on whose position I was in, Bo's or the adult trapped in the cage. If I were Bo, then my first instinct would be to try to sneakily get my hands on that taser. That way, I'd at least have a means to defend myself while I worked on my plan to get my dad out of the cell. Here's what I'm thinking. One of these kids must have the jail key, and I'd try to figure out which one it was and catch them alone somewhere. Then, I'd tase that little delinquent until they had more volts in their system than a Tesla battery. Take the keys and throw them through the bars so that my dad could let himself out while I prepared for the incoming child counterattack. Hopefully, with the combined might of all the parents fighting together, we could turn the tables on these little twerps. Alternatively, if I were one of the adults stuck in that cage with no idea what Eden's plans were, other than the feeling that she was eventually going to kill us, I'd suggest to the kids that they should use a game or lottery to choose our fates. That way, I'd at least have a chance to survive either by beating the adults in whatever game the kids come up with, or outlasting them with dumb luck. Anything that slows the kids down and adds steps to the process would give me more chances to escape or fight back. Once I realized that her plan was to gas us with halothane, I'd have one more last-ditch escape attempt in mind. Although I'll warn you right now that it isn't glamorous. I remember learning that in the trenches of World War I, Allied soldiers would protect themselves from gas attacks by holding urine-soaked fabric up to their faces. Well, I'm still wearing clothes, so I have fabric, and I should have plenty of the other stuff too. So if I acted quickly, I might be able to fashion myself an improvised gas mask before the fumes put me to sleep. Then, I'd just pretend to be knocked out and wait for my moment to escape. If that's a bit much for you to stomach, it might be possible to taunt Eden into coming closer to the bars and then pull her mask off when she got close. But this one relies too much on chance. And even though it's gross, I'd still be putting my faith in plan number 1. The worst case scenario would be waking up in that hole, but even then, I still have a plan to get out. The first thing I would do would be to go to the side of the hole that's furthest away from the bulldozer. Then, I'd quickly organize all of the other adults into pairs, with one standing on the other's shoulders and climbing out, and then turning around to pull their partner up. The kids would inevitably start picking us off like we were storming the beaches of Normandy. But if we were coordinated and fast enough, maybe a few of us could make it out and start holding them off while the others climb up. It's going to be a brutal fight, but anything is better than being buried alive. Bo tells her friends to go for help, but stays behind to save her dad, and even though it's not the best idea, personally, I can't blame her. There are a lot of people I'd be willing to sacrifice here, but I'd feel pretty bad about leaving her dad behind since he clearly loves her. The only thing I would have done differently is ask one friend to stay with me while the other friend goes to help. That way, I'd have some backup in a fight. It's all up to Bo now, and we'll have to see if she can save her dad and the remaining adults before they all end up as corn food. Eden and her crew walk down the road as Bo catches up to them. She tells Eden that she needs to stop, but Eden tells her that putting the adults on trial was her idea, and asks her what she thought would happen. Eden tells Bo that it's the kids against the adults and she needs to choose her side. Bo asks her what she's going to do with the rest of the adults, and Eden tells her that she's going to send them into the corn to feed the creature out there that she calls He Who Walks. Eden says that while she was lost in the corn, the creature took care of her, which no adult has ever done, so now she's going to take care of him, and it's time for the adults to pay the price. Back at the police station, Bo runs up to her father and tells him to go with them when they take him to the corn, and use it as his opportunity to escape. The pastor says that if Eden wants them to go into the fields, then they should be doing the exact opposite, but she tells them not to worry about it because he was never going into the corn anyway. He thinks that this means she's going to spare his life, but she shakes her head and laughs. She's going to take care of him herself. The kids take him out of the cell and hold him down, and Eden kneels over him, gouging his eyes out with a rusty farm blade. She pulls his eyeballs right out of his head and holds them up to the room as the kids scream with bloodlust like barbarians. Bo can only look on in horror as Eden turns around and stares her down. They take the remaining adults outside, and Bo's dad asks where her mom is. But she tells him not to think about that right now and instead to focus on his opportunity to escape. He says that he'll try to go get help, telling Bo to stay and fight, and walks off into the corn. Eden tells Bo that she did good and tells the other kids that she's no longer a threat. Bo gets a knife from one of the several adult corpses lying around in the fields and goes to the community hall. Inside, Eden is holding court with her gang of kids and tells them that from now on, nobody is going to be allowed into or out of their town. She says that the corn will provide for them, and anyone who shows up will be fed to it. Suddenly, the kids lift a sheet off of a body in the corner and reveal that it's the reporter. Eden asks Bo if they should cut her head off, but Bo volunteers to send her into the corn instead. Eden likes the idea, and Bo approaches the reporter, giving her a look that signals that it's all a trick. She takes her to the door, but just as they're about to leave, Eden stops them, saying that they're going to take her straight to the monster. The kids carry her out into the fields with Eden leading the way. The group arrives at a barn and brings the reporter inside while the corn whispers like crazy. Bo follows them inside and finds tons of bags of synthetic growing materials. She hears the sounds of flies buzzing and looks up to see Carly and Tanika's mutilated bodies pinned to the roof. Bo closes her eyes and readies herself for a fight when she hears the sound of a struggle in the other room. Going to investigate, Bo finds the kids chaining the reporter to some farming equipment. Eden orders the kids to take her up and they raise her to the ceiling with the chains. The kids open the barn doors and Eden calls out for the creature to come to them. The corn rustles for a moment, but the wind dies down and it looks like nothing is going to happen. Bo tells Eden that the creature doesn't exist and the kids surround her, but she lunges for Eden and holds a knife to her neck. Just then, she hears a tremendous roar, and it looks like some enormous creature is coming towards them through the fields. Eden shakes Bo off and she backs away, terrified, as the creature emerges from the darkness. Everyone stands there petrified as the monster stomps into the barn and drags the horrified reporter out by her feet. Eden gives one of her minions the signal and he strikes Bo in the back with a baseball bat, knocking her unconscious. Okay, a gang of feral kids was bad enough, but adding an unidentified corn creature into the mix is really going to get things popping. Eden reveals to Bo that she's working for a corn monster that she calls He Who Walks, which changes the circumstances dramatically. The good news is that if it's made of corn, then you don't have to think very hard about how to kill it. Some good old-fashioned fire should do the trick, and if that doesn't work, you can always just try eating it before it eats you. Despite Eden telling her that there's a monster in the corn, Bo still thinks that going out there is her dad's best chance to escape. She doesn't have any proof that the creature actually exists yet, but the pastor makes a good point when he says that if Eden wants them to go out into the fields, then they should be doing the opposite. He's an evil man though, and Eden decides to handle him personally. The rest of the town may have turned a blind eye to what he was doing, but in the end, Eden helped him see the error in his ways. Bo earns Eden's trust, which is smart, but almost blows her cover when she speaks up for the reporter. She might have thought that she bought the reporter some time, but having her head cut off then and there might have been preferable to being King Konged by Evil Groot. Bo takes the moment of confusion when it looks like the creature isn't going to show up to spring at Eden and hold her at hostage. But this is a pretty bad plan. Even if you take her down, the other kids are going to jump you. Bo doesn't have a lot of other options here though, so I would have set up next to one of the barrels of flammable liquid and threatened to set the whole place on fire if they don't surrender, and figured out the rest of the details on the fly. Things take a turn when the creature shows up for real, but as far as monsters go, I must say that a corn giant isn't very intimidating. Simply kill it with fire, and in the worst case scenario, at least there are plenty of psychotic kids around to use as meat shields. Bo doesn't react quickly enough and gets knocked unconscious, and we'll have to see if she makes it out alive when she wakes up. Bo wakes up to the kids covering her with flammable liquid. Eden lights a match, ready to burn her alive, but Bo reminds her that if she starts a fire, she'll blow the whole place up because of the grain dust. Not wanting to burn the corn, Eden puts out the flame and orders the kids to chop Bo up instead. She stands up as the kids approach and splashes the liquid in her face, blinding them and giving her a chance to escape. Bo runs into the corn with the mob following behind her. She runs through the fields, dripping with the flammable liquid and leaving a trail of it behind until she trips and finds her father's wedding ring in the mud. She looks up and sees her dad's dead body hung in the corn like a scarecrow, but can't stick around unless she wants to share the same fate. She tells him that she's sorry, and as she's running away, the corn grows over his face and engulfs his whole body. Bo makes it to the corn silo, where Calder was keeping his car, and sees the reporter there laying on the ground. The woman calls out to Bo for help, but in an instant she's dragged away by the massive creature, and it rips her body in half and throws the pieces out into the field before turning in Bo's direction. She runs for her life, but the corn grows around her and traps her in. Bo hears the monster stomping around and sits there fearfully accepting her fate, but for a moment it seems like the monster leaves. Suddenly, the creature lunges at Bo from the darkness and reaches out to grab her, but she stabs it in the head with a rusty farm blade. The creature staggers back, screaming in pain, and Bo takes the opportunity to run for her life. Bo gets back to Calder's car and sees that the gas tank is leaking. She climbs in and tries to start it up, but it won't turn over. She tries again, finally getting it to start and tearing off into the cornfield. Bo makes it to the road, but as soon as she pulls onto it, the car dies. She panics and tries to start it up, and finally the car roars back to life. But that's when Eden reveals that she's been hiding in the back seat the whole time. Bo begs her to please stop the insanity, but Eden climbs into the front seat and shows her that she has a cattle gun. Eden warns her to not try and fight back and shuts the car off, telling Bo to get out. Bo notices a pack of cigarettes on the dashboard and asks Eden if she can have one last smoke. Eden agrees and waits impatiently as the cigarette lighter heats up and then takes it and hands it to Bo. They get out of the car and Eden orders Bo to get down on her knees. She holds the farm tool to Bo's head, but just as she's about to kill her, Bo drops the lighter into the puddle of fuel and it bursts into flames. A trail of flames runs through the entire cornfield, setting everything on fire and leading all the way to the barn. Inside, the barrels of flammable liquid catch fire, and the entire place blows sky high, sending flames into the cornfield for miles around. Bo tells Eden that it's over, and the people from the nearby towns will be coming to see what's going on soon. Just then, the monster stumbles out of the corn, falling apart from the flames. Eden tells the monster that she's sorry, and follows it out into the burning field as the rest of the kids stand back and watch. The monster roars and crumbles from the flames, and the nightmare is finally over. Okay, it looks like these crops just got dusted. Being covered in flammable liquid is almost always a bad thing, but luckily for Bo, she happens to be in one of the only situations where it actually works in her favor. She's able to stop Eden from lighting her on fire since she doesn't want to hurt the corn, and even blinds the kids with the fuel when they attack her, giving her a chance to run for it. She finds out what happens to her dad, but there's no time to dwell on it with the psychotic kids and corn monster hot on her tail. Going for the car was a great idea, but unfortunately, the corn monster beat her to it, and it looks like they're going to need a new reporter back in Omaha. The creature traps Bo and is about to make her its next victim, but luckily she gets her hands on a weapon and stabs it in the head. That seems to do the trick, and she gets her chance to escape. But if she didn't have a weapon on hand, she could always try taking a bite out of the thing. It is just made of corn after all. Why Eden agrees to let Bo have a last smoke, I couldn't tell you, especially since she knows that she's covered in flammable liquid. It's obviously a trick, and Bo has even told her twice now how dangerous open flames would be for the corn, but I guess she just doesn't listen. Lucky for Bo, her bluff works, and she's able to light the whole field on fire, killing the monster and Eden, and attracting the attention of people from miles around. It looks like the battle is over, but we won't know the final outcome until the smoke clears. Later, Bo wanders through the burned up cornfield until she finds Eden's ring lying in the dirt. She picks it up, but the ring disappears from her hand. Hearing steps behind her, Bo turns around to see a burned up zombie Eden standing behind her. Suddenly, Eden's body breaks apart into corn stalks that wrap around Bo as she screams in terror, claiming her once and for all. But what would you do? If you found yourself up against evil children with a corn monster on their side, how would you react? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this. And don't forget, from now on, we'll be uploading on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Until next time, have a damn good day.